woman who once sang that she didn't believe in love, wore leather jackets like armor, and stood on stage like she was ready to set fire to the patriarchy. Deborah Conway wasn't just a singer. She was a cultural jolt. A beautiful rebel in a male-dominated world of rock and roll, she challenged everything Australians thought a woman in music should be. But years later, when she chose to raise a child on her own, the same media that once praised her audacity turned around and called her reckless, unfit, and irresponsible. How did Australia go from idolizing her independence to punishing her for it? What happened behind closed doors when Deborah Conway went from the frontwoman of a groundbreaking band to a mother grappling with solitude and public scorn? Before she stepped away from the spotlight, Deborah made one quiet admission that shocked even her closest fans. It wasn't about fame or music or even the controversies she carried like scars. It was about what it cost to be both an icon and a woman. This is the untold story of Deborah Conway, a voice that rocked a nation, a life that defied the rules, and a woman who was never allowed to simply be. In the early 1980s, Australia's music scene was a battleground of identity, rebellion, and raw talent. Amid the surf of pub rock bands and male-fronted acts, emerged a young woman from Melbourne who refused to be boxed in. Deborah Conway, tall, striking, and fiercely articulate, began her artistic journey not as a singer, but as a model and theater actress. But the stage wasn't enough. She needed a voice. And when she found it, she unleashed something Australia wasn't ready for. She first tasted fame with the short-lived but unforgettable band Do Re Mi, whose 1985 single Man Overboard smashed expectations. The track, unapologetic in its references to abortion, power dynamics, and female agency, stunned radio stations. Many refused to play it, yet it still climbed the charts. Deborah, with her stark vocal delivery and defiant gaze, became a symbol of resistance, a woman who wouldn't smile for approval or soften her truth. She wasn't just singing songs, she was challenging Australia's discomfort with female power, and not the palatable kind. Conway's power was jagged, unpredictable, and confrontational. She posed nude on album art, not to please but to provoke, reclaiming the female form in a country where women were still largely expected to be silent muses, not dangerous thinkers. But success didn't come with comfort. Deborah was labeled too intense, too masculine, too difficult. Where male rock stars were celebrated for being uncompromising, she was questioned, and slowly her band fractured. Creative tensions, industry pressure, and a public that struggled to accept her complexity pushed her toward a solo career. In the early 1990s, as grunge exploded globally, Conway pivoted. Her debut solo album, String of Pearls, featured elegant songwriting, melodic restraint, and a refined visual style. Gone was the rebellious snarl. In its place stood a woman who had seemingly found peace. Or had she simply learned to hide the chaos beneath? The media welcomed the new image. But for Conway, it was a balancing act between authenticity and survival. And then, in the middle of this carefully rebuilt career, she did something that would reignite the fire. She chose to become a single mother. The headlines were not kind. The same newspapers that once hailed her as bold now whispered about irresponsibility. Talk shows debated whether she had set a bad example, as if her body and her choices were still up for public approval. Conway never apologized. She never asked for sympathy. But in rare interviews, she hinted at a fatigue deeper than fame, the exhaustion of being a woman constantly judged for being human. This story is not just about rock music or fame. It's about a cultural double standard that punishes women for aging, for mothering, for evolving. Deborah Conway lived through it all and sang through it all. Before the controversies and headlines, Deborah Conway was just a teenager in Melbourne with a fire burning behind her eyes. Born in 1959 to a Jewish family, Conway didn't follow the traditional path of university and quiet domesticity that many expected of girls in her circle. Instead, she veered into acting, appearing in student theater and fringe productions, but it was in music that she found her truest form of rebellion. She co-founded the post-punk band Do Re Mi in Sydney in the early 1980s, a group that quickly built a reputation for sharp lyrics, angular sounds, and a frontwoman who refused to fit into anyone's mold. While other female singers were told to tone it down, Deborah did the opposite. Her voice cut through like a blade, clear, cold, fearless. She didn't try to be likable. She tried to be heard. The moment Do-Re-Mi released Man Overboard, everything changed. The song had no chorus, no obvious hook, and yet it sliced into the public consciousness with lines about abortion, dominance, and gender roles. "There's a man overboard and the water's deep" was more than a metaphor. It was a warning. This woman wasn't going to pull punches. Radio stations refused to play it. Deborah was asked to explain the lyrics. Isn't it too much? Shouldn't you be more careful? But the public, or at least part of it, was ready. The single hit the top 5 on the Australian charts. The band had made its point. The success should have cemented them, but fame, like music, is full of egos and friction. Inside the band, creative disagreements simmered. Deborah's increasingly strong vision for the direction clashed with the rest. She began to feel boxed in, even within the group she helped create. By the late 80s, Do-Re-Mi had disbanded, and Deborah Conway stood alone. No band, no label, no clear path forward. But Conway didn't disappear. She recalibrated. Her 1991 solo debut, String of Pearls, was a stunning reinvention. It was tender without being weak, poetic without being abstract. Songs like It's Only the Beginning gave her mainstream airplay without compromising her intelligence. Her voice, matured and weathered by experience, carried new warmth. The public warmed to this new Deborah. Less sharp edges, more open heart. She toured, won awards, and appeared on television, increasingly becoming part of Australia's cultural fabric. But while her image was softening, her life behind the scenes was anything but. She had relationships, some fleeting, others more serious, yet none led to the traditional domesticity the media quietly expected of her. She remained defiantly single. And then, in the late 90s, she became a mother, without a husband, without a PR campaign, without apology. And that's when the tide shifted again. While male rockers had fathered children across continents with barely a raised eyebrow, Deborah, now in her late 30s, was treated like a cautionary tale. Newspaper columnists referred to her poor choices, and morning shows questioned her message to young women. The old rock rebel who once challenged the patriarchy was now being told she was setting a bad example for simply choosing motherhood on her own terms. Still, she didn't retreat. Instead, she poured her experiences into new music, raw, stripped back, confessional. Albums like Exquisite Stereo and Summertown revealed an artist who had nothing left to prove and everything to express. She wasn't trying to impress the charts. She was documenting a life lived against the grain. And the price of that? It wasn't just tabloid judgment. It was silence, the quiet removal from radio playlists, fewer interviews, and a media industry that moved on, chasing newer, safer idols. But for those who listened, who really listened, Conway's later work was her most honest. Songs filled with the aches of compromise, the quiet triumphs of survival, and the messy beauty of womanhood without filters. Her rise wasn't just a climb to fame. It was a war of perception, of identity, of self-respect, fought with lyrics instead of bullets. As the applause faded and the spotlight moved on, Deborah Conway found herself navigating a more treacherous stage, one without music, without fans, without the shield of performance. It was the stage of real life, lived under the watchful, judgmental gaze of a society still unsure what to make of a woman who refused to obey its rules. Becoming a single mother wasn't a publicity move. It was a decision made in privacy, one she never intended to justify. But the media treated it as rebellion, as if her uterus had committed treason. She always wanted attention, one columnist wrote. Now she's doing it through motherhood. The scrutiny was relentless. Her parenting was questioned in ways that no male artist had ever experienced. Was she too old, too unstable, too unconventional? But behind closed doors, Deborah was not unraveling. She was rebuilding. In interviews, she offered glimpses into the emotional toll. There's this constant message that you have to choose, art or family. No one says that to men, she said once, her voice calm but heavy. But when you're a woman, it's always a negotiation. You're never enough. She found solace in music again, not as a career, but as confession. Her later albums are filled with unsaid truths, not the big, headline-grabbing kind, but the quiet devastations that come with being forgotten. The slow fade of relevance, the empty chair after a show, the silence when the phone stops ringing. And yet, the core of Deborah Conway's artistry remained, defiance wrapped in grace. She began collaborating with her partner Willie Zygier, not just as musicians, but as equal co-creators, crafting deeply personal records from their home. This wasn't a comeback, it was an evolution. She no longer needed to scream to be heard. Still, the industry didn't quite know what to do with her. She wasn't young enough to market, wasn't scandalous enough to exploit, wasn't safe enough to celebrate. Radio ignored her. Awards passed her by. One producer reportedly told her, "You're brilliant, but you don't fit the demo." It was a coded way of saying, "You're a woman who won't fade quietly, and we don't have room for that." But her fans remained. And for those who followed her journey, Conway became something far more valuable than a chart topper. She became a blueprint for independence, for unapologetic femininity, for survival. One of her songs, "Accidents Happen in the Home," contains the haunting lyric, "She made the right choice, but the wrong time, and they never let her forget it." It was never confirmed who she wrote it for, but anyone who knew Deborah's story understood. Even years later, the media couldn't resist dragging her name back into controversy. A lifestyle magazine once ran a retrospective piece titled, "Whatever Happened to Deborah Conway?" As if her quieter life was a failure, as if choosing motherhood, partnership, and authenticity meant she had vanished. But the truth is, she never left. She just stopped asking for permission. In the end, Deborah Conway's greatest scandal wasn't a lyric or a photo or a lifestyle choice. It was this. She dared to be a woman in full, loud, complex, sexual, maternal, aging, without apology. And that, more than any song, shook Australia. At Aussie Uncovered, we don't just revisit names from the past. We question the narratives that defined them, twisted them, or quietly erased them. Deborah Conway is one such name. Not forgotten, not irrelevant, but inconvenient. Inconvenient for an industry that prefers its women frozen in youth. Inconvenient for a media that applauds rebellion until it becomes maternal. Inconvenient for a culture that still doesn't know how to celebrate a woman who refuses to shrink. We believe Deborah Conway is one of the most intellectually and emotionally courageous artists Australia has ever produced. Her refusal to conform, whether through lyrics, image, or lifestyle, wasn't a brand, it was a statement. She gave us music that confronted abortion, control, female rage, domestic grief, and did it with poetry that never begged for approval. But what stands out the most isn't just her early audacity. It's the way she survived the long silence that followed. Conway could have chased relevance. She could have played the nostalgia circuit, molded her self-help into the crowd-pleasing version the industry prefers. But she didn't. Instead, she made deeply personal, fiercely independent music, often ignored by mainstream platforms, yet cherished by those who truly listened. We don't see Deborah's shift into motherhood and domesticity as a decline. We see it as a new act, one where she traded the noise of fame for the quiet of authenticity. And yet, society made her pay for that choice. She wasn't scandalous. She was punished for not playing the game. We think the real scandal isn't anything Deborah Conway did. It's how Australia treated her for doing it. And so we ask you, the audience, to look again. Listen again. Strip away what you thought you knew about her. Was she too loud, too honest, too complicated? Or was she simply ahead of her time? What do you remember about Deborah Conway? Did her songs soundtrack your youth? Or did her story speak to something deeper? Did you ever see yourself in her defiance or in her silence? This channel stands by artists like Deborah not because they were perfect, but because they were real. And because real women telling real stories still make people uncomfortable. Somewhere in the heart of Melbourne, away from the stages, the cameras, and the hungry gaze of media, Deborah Conway lives quietly. No longer the girl in combat boots challenging radio stations. No longer the woman scrutinized for raising a child alone. Just a voice, still writing, still singing, still resisting the silence. She never asked to be a symbol, but in many ways, she became one. For the women who didn't want to choose between art and motherhood. For the girls who saw power in being difficult. For the mothers who raised their children without a blueprint, only instinct and music. We remember the glossy photos, the controversies, the chart toppers. But what lingers longer are the verses. Strange, sharp, human. The way she stood on stage and dared us to look her in the eyes. The way she said what others only whispered. The way she never apologized for being more than what they allowed. Deborah Conway may never headline the nostalgia festivals. She may never get the glowing tribute at an awards show. but her legacy is stitched into the quiet revolutions of every Australian woman who dared to want more. Some stories are never told, but now you know. And somewhere, maybe on a dusty CD or a vinyl tucked away in someone's shelf, a song begins again. And Deborah sings, not for applause, but because she always had something worth saying.